stage, but just a couple of contextual remarks. I think that one of the things that is so exciting in terms of being part of this movement is that one way or another we just keep on winning and racking up one success after another. We just came out of a fantastic Financing the Future Summit in Cape Town, South Africa 2 weeks ago. It was the first global Divest Invest Summit conference in the Global South. And there were a whole host of announcements made there. The Divest Invest movement surpassed for the first time the $11 trillion threshold in terms of assets under management pledged to some form of divestment from fossil fuels. There was a creation of the first fossil-free investment vehicle in South Africa. On the faith side, and this was an interesting one, in addition to 22 Protestant and Catholic institutions announcing new divestment commitments, the Fiqh Council, or the Islamic Scholars Council of North America, issued an authoritative religious ruling, which is also referred to as a fatwa, calling on Islamic institutions globally to divest from fossil fuels and to invest in energy access for every human being on the planet. Not only did they do that, but they pledged their commitment publicly to go to their counterpart scholarly councils in different parts of the world to encourage them to take this up. They called on Islamic investment houses immediately to generate fossil fuel-free investment vehicles. So that was a very interesting sort of cultural intervention there. So we've got a lot of good things to celebrate. Scott Stringer has spent his career in public service, fighting to ensure that every New Yorker has an equal opportunity. Over the last 2 decades, he's been a champion for the $15 minimum wage, advocated for affordable housing, worked to strengthen the city's fiscal health, promoted open, transparent government. Born and raised a little bit uptown from here in Washington Heights, Mr. Stringer was elected to the State Assembly in '92, represented the West Side for 13 years, became Manhattan Borough President in 2006, elected Comptroller in 2013 and here's where it gets really good, as an investment advisor to, custodian, and trustee of the city's 5 pension funds. He oversees the city's $199 billion public pension system, and he's here to speak to us about New York City's historic Divest Invest decision. Comptroller Stringer, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and I want to thank you for having me tonight, and I want to thank you, Fletcher, for that introduction. It's a real pleasure to join so many of the world's leading minds on climate change and sustainable finance to discuss the divestment movement and how we can really mobilize together to push the biggest companies in the world, the biggest polluters in the world, and the lawmakers of the world to face the reality of our climate crisis and make foundational changes to tackle it head on. So tonight, first and foremost, I want to thank the activists and advocates who have built one of the most impactful global coalitions we have ever seen: Green Faith, Sunrise Project, Divest Invest, Fossil Free, the Center of International Environmental Law, and 350.org. Give them a round of applause. And this movement has come a long way. What began as a moral call for action, largely led by students protesting at the college offices and university halls, has swept across over 1,000 institutions with over $11 trillion in holdings. That's momentum. And I remember the old days when we all first met when I became controller. I remember you. Hi. Everywhere I went, I mean everywhere, you were there, blaring bullhorns, my face on other people's faces, saying to me what was in plain sight, that it was time to do something that would have meaningful impact, and that was to match the urgency of the crisis with real change. And that is why we decided, with our trustees and our coalition, to begin what is a historic fossil fuel divestment in the New York City Pension Fund. It is. Some people said that this move was too extreme and it was fringe, that nobody would take this seriously. And I didn't know for sure as we began this process what the reaction would be, and I was invited to the United Nations to talk about it. And I'm on a panel with some very large companies with trillions of dollars in assets. And one company after another started talking about their divestment strategy. And that's when I know that this was going to happen. That's when I knew that we could save the planet. Because we have organized, and you've organized, internationally in a big way. Now, 3 years earlier, our pension fund fully divested from thermal coal, one of the dirtiest and most dangerous sources of power. And we are handling this process like we handled the coal process, carefully, to craft a model of responsible divestment that supports our pensioners for the long term. And each day we make progress to align our funds with our future. Ultimately, we believe that tinkering around the edges will not move the needle with big oil and our biggest polluters far enough. It's not enough for companies to assess their climate change risks. They have to change. It's not enough for companies to disclose their lobbying practices. They have to change. It's not enough for companies to add a single climate competent board member to their board of directors. They have to fundamentally change their business practices. I don't know if it's because of the work the pension fund is doing or your work, but in fact, global oil companies now note, quote unquote, divestment as a material risk to their business. Think about that. So while climate change and the planet may not move them, divestment just might. And that's why when people say that fiduciary duty should keep us from pushing forward, I want to be clear that is because of our commitment to fiduciary duty that New York City is in the fight. We understand that to protect the retirement security of New Yorkers, we have to draw the line today. We got to up the ante, we have to put our money where our mouth is and take concrete action in New York to show the rest of the country how to lead. But our action is not just about divestment. It's about investment. And that's why we're putting our pension dollars to work for a more sustainable future. We're doubling our investments in climate solutions and putting billions into green energy, pollution prevention, and sustainable infrastructure. I want to work with Mayor de Blasio to invest in green bonds so that we can give investors option to do it the new way. I want to create a program called Blue Bonds because it's time we invest in water resiliency projects as a way to combat climate change right up to the shoreline. So across industry, we're seeing progress. Just this past week, 3 of the country's largest power utilities made net zero commitments for 2050. Power utilities are the linchpin of the climate effort. We cannot decarbonize our economy without them, and this movement is encouraging. In New York State, we are still fighting to block the construction of the Williams Pipeline, a frack gas channel that would blast through climate vulnerable communities and force New Yorkers to rely even more heavily on fossil fuel. I am proud to be the first citywide elected official to raise my opposition to this project, and this week we got the support from the governor. This is very good news, and we're going to continue to go forward. To highlight this, tomorrow I am going on a boat, and we're going to tour Brooklyn and the shoreline in the city for 3 hours, looking at what the pipeline would do to our city, to our communities, because we have to keep the pressure up. I want you to know if I get seasick, I will not stop. I don't want to go back to the old days and say you couldn't finish the job, so we're going to be doing that tomorrow. And lastly, many of you know this saying, but it hits home to me. And it was part of my decision-making process as to why engagement was not the answer to fighting climate change. There is a saying that says we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. It's very hard for me to come home as a dad of 2 young children, 7.5 and 6. Don't smirk. When I look at those little boys and I say, what am I doing, right? I gotta be accountable. And while I believe strongly in the Green New Deal, I can't vote for that in Congress. I have to work with what I have. And as the voters of New York who have entrusted me with this pension fund, we will do a divestment and an investment that will make my kids proud someday. We will save other kids we're never going to know or meet. And maybe, just maybe, we will save this planet and change the course of history. Thank you for everything you do, and have a good day. Thank you very much. Thank you.